The winter sky hung low and gray over Snow Pine, Montana territory, pressing down on the small town like a wool blanket soaked through with grief. The Methodist church stood at the end of Main Street, its white clapboard walls stark against the muddy snow that clung to the ground in stubborn patches. Inside, the annual memorial service for those who had fallen was about to begin. Hannah Whitfield stood in the vestibule, her hands trembling as she smoothed down the faded ivory silk of her wedding dress. The fabric, once pristine, now bore the yellowed marks of time and too many washings. She had worn it 3 years ago when she married Thomas, and now she wore it to remember him. Some might call it improper, but it was the finest dress she owned, and Thomas deserved her best, even in memory. The murmur of voices from within the sanctuary carried through the heavy wooden doors. Hannah drew in a breath that caught in her chest like a fishhook. She knew what awaited her inside. The stares, the whispers, the barely concealed snickers. At 25, she was already marked as the town's pitiful widow, made worse by the fullness of her figure that had only increased since Thomas's death. Grief, she had learned, could be a hungry companion. She pushed open the door. The whispers started immediately, rippling through the congregation like wind through wheat. Hannah kept her eyes fixed on the altar where Reverend Morrison stood, his thin face pinched with disapproval. She could feel the weight of dozens of gazes, some pitying, most mocking. "Lord have mercy," she heard Mrs. Abigail Fletcher stage whisper from the third pew. "She's actually wearing her wedding dress. Has the woman no shame?" "Look at her," came another voice, belonging to young Constance Price. "That dress is about to split at the seams. Poor Thomas must be rolling in his grave." Hannah's cheeks burned, but she continued her slow walk down the aisle. Her dress was indeed tighter than it had been even 6 months ago, but it was clean, carefully mended where it had torn, and pressed with the flat iron she heated on her small stove every Sunday morning. She found an empty space in a back pew, trying to make herself small, an impossible task for a woman of her size. The wood creaked under her weight, and she heard a snort of laughter from somewhere behind her. Reverend Morrison began the service, his reedy voice calling out the names of the departed. "We gather today to remember those whom the Lord has called home this past year. Benjamin Hart, taken by the fever. Mary Sullivan, lost in childbirth. Thomas Whitfield, claimed by the mine collapse at Copper Creek." At her husband's name, Hannah's eyes filled with tears she had sworn she wouldn't shed. Not here, not in front of them. She reached into her reticule for her handkerchief, and in doing so, knocked her small bouquet of dried wildflowers to the floor. They scattered across the aisle, purple asters and yellow black-eyed Susans she had carefully preserved from Thomas's grave. She bent to gather them, and the seam at her waist gave way with an audible rip. The laughter was no longer hidden. It burst forth from several directions at once, cruel and sharp as winter wind. Perhaps if she didn't eat her grief, she'd still fit in her clothes, someone muttered. Hannah straightened slowly, the flowers crushed in her fist, the torn seam gaping at her side. She met Reverend Morrison's eyes, hoping for some word of comfort or rebuke to the mockers, but he merely cleared his throat and continued reading names. With as much dignity as she could muster, Hannah walked to the altar where a small table held mementos of the deceased. She placed her crumpled flowers next to Thomas's name, written in her own careful script on a piece of card. Her hands shook as she arranged the dried blooms, trying to make them look less destroyed. "Thomas always loved wildflowers," she whispered, her voice catching. "Said they were honest flowers, growing where God planted them, not needing anybody's approval to bloom." The church had grown quiet, but it wasn't a respectful silence. It was the pause before the storm of gossip that would follow her out. Hannah turned to face the congregation, her chin lifted despite the tears now flowing freely down her round cheeks. "I'm sorry my presence offends you," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "But Thomas was my husband, and I have as much right as anyone to mourn him properly." She walked back down the aisle, holding her hand over the torn seam, her footsteps echoing in the now silent church. As she reached the door, she heard the whispers start again, following her like crows after carrion. Outside, the cold air hit her heated face like a slap. She stumbled toward the side of the church, seeking somewhere private to compose herself, and nearly collided with a man standing in the shadows of the covered porch. He was tall and lean, dressed in worn leather and denim, with a day's worth of stubble shadowing his jaw. His hat was pulled low, but she could see his eyes, gray as the winter sky, and studying her with an expression she couldn't read. This was Weston Dyer, the solitary rancher who kept to himself out at Hollow Ridge, rarely coming to town except for supplies. "Ma'am," he said, touching the brim of his hat. His voice was low and rough, like creek stones tumbling together. Hannah wiped hastily at her tears, mortified to be caught in such a state. "Mr. Dyer, I apologize. I didn't see you there." He reached into his coat and pulled out a clean handkerchief, offering it to her without a word. When she hesitated, he said, "It's clean. My daughter insists I carry one, though Lord knows I rarely have cause to use it." Hannah accepted it gratefully, dabbing at her eyes. "Thank you. You're very kind." "Kindness has nothing to do with it," he said, his eyes flicking toward the church door where the sounds of gossip continued to seep out. "Just basic decency. Something that seems in short supply in there." She looked at him in surprise. Most folks in Snow Pine either joined in the mockery or pretended not to notice. Weston Dyer did neither. "You were at the service?" she asked. "Outside, mostly. Came to pay respects to Ben Hart. He shoed my horses for near 10 years. He paused, then added, "Heard what they said in there. About you and your dress." Hannah's face burned anew. "I suppose the whole town will be laughing about it by nightfall." "Let them laugh." His tone was flat, matter of fact. "Folks who find entertainment in another's grief got something broken inside them. Your husband, he was one of the miners." "Yes, Thomas Whitfield, he was—" She swallowed hard. "He was a good man. Always saw the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it." "Then he was a better man than most." Weston shifted his weight, seeming uncomfortable with the conversation, but not eager to end it. "My Mary, she used to say that grief sits different on everyone. Some folks wear it like a hair shirt, some like armor. Looks to me like you wear yours like a banner." Hannah looked down at her wedding dress, is seeing it suddenly through different eyes. "I suppose I do. It's foolish. I know." "Didn't say it was foolish. Takes courage to show your grief honest-like. Most folks hide it away. Pretend it doesn't exist." He glanced toward the church. "You planning on going back in there?" "No." The word came out more forcefully than she intended. "I've paid my respects. Thomas wouldn't want me to subject myself to any more of their kindness." A ghost of a smile touched Weston's lips. "Wise choice. I'm heading back to my ranch, but—" He paused, seeming to weigh his words. "You need anything, Mrs. Whitfield. The winter's coming on hard, and I know it ain't easy for a woman alone." The offer surprised her. In the months since Thomas's death, few had extended any real help. "That's kind of you, Mr. Dyer, but I manage well enough." He studied her for a moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling he saw through her brave words to the empty pantry and dwindling woodpile at her small cabin. But he didn't press. "The offer stands," he said simply. He touched his hat brim again and turned to leave, then paused. "Your husband was right about wildflowers. They don't need anybody's approval. Neither do you." He walked away, his boots crunching in the icy mud, leaving Hannah standing alone on the porch with his handkerchief clutched in her hand. She looked down at it, plain white cotton, carefully hemmed, with the initials WDD embroidered in one corner in a child's uneven stitches. The church doors burst open, and the congregation began to file out. Hannah slipped around the corner of the building, not ready to face them again. She heard their voices, bright with scandal and judgment, dissecting her appearance and behavior like she was nothing more than the day's entertainment. But for the first time in months, their words didn't cut quite as deep. She thought of Weston Dyer's quiet presence, his matter-of-fact kindness, and the way he'd spoken of grief like someone who understood its weight. She pressed his handkerchief to her cheek, catching the faint scent of leather and pine soap. Perhaps there were still decent people in Snow Pine. Perhaps she wasn't as alone as she'd thought. The sky was beginning to clear, showing patches of pale winter blue between the clouds. Hannah pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, covering the torn seam of her dress, and began the long walk home. Tomorrow she would have to face the town again, would have to endure their whispers and stares. But tonight, she would allow herself to remember Thomas as he truly was, and to hope that somewhere in this harsh land, kindness might still find room to grow. As she walked, she didn't notice the small figure watching from an upstairs window of the parsonage, a little girl with dark curls and serious gray eyes, who had seen everything and would remember the lady in the beautiful old dress, who had stood up to the whole church and made her papa smile for the first time in ever so long. The walk back to her cabin seemed endless. Hannah's feet ached in her Sunday boots, and the torn seam of her dress let in fingers of cold air that made her shiver. She was almost to her gate when she heard the sound of wagon wheels behind her. Mrs. Whitfield. She turned to find Weston Dyer pulling up in a weathered buckboard, his daughter beside him on the bench seat. The little girl was watching Hannah with those same serious gray eyes she'd inherited from her father. "Mr. Dyer," Hannah said, surprised. "I thought you'd gone. Was heading out when Isla here pointed out you were walking the same direction." He gestured to the empty wagon bed. "Seems foolish not to offer a ride." The little girl, Isla, leaned forward. "You're the pretty lady from church," she announced with the directness of a child. "The one in the wedding dress. I liked your flowers." Hannah's throat tightened. "Thank you, sweetheart. That's very kind of you to say." "Hop up," Weston said, already moving to help her. "Unless you prefer the walk." Pride warred with practicality and the ache in her feet. Practicality won. "I'd be grateful for the ride." He helped her up onto the wagon bed where some hay bales provided seating, his hands careful and impersonal. As they started moving, Isla turned around to study Hannah with unabashed curiosity. "Papa says you're sad because your husband went to heaven," the child said. "My mama's in heaven too. Do you think they know each other?" "Isla," Weston said quietly, a warning in his tone. "It's all right," Hannah said, managing a smile for the little girl. "I'd like to think they do know each other. Heaven must be a friendly place." "Mama liked to sing," Isla continued. "She sang while she cooked and cleaned and sewed. Papa doesn't sing. He says he sounds like a crow with a sore throat." Despite everything, Hannah found herself chuckling. "Well, not everyone is blessed with a singing voice." "Do you sing, ma'am?" "Sometimes, when I'm alone. That's when Papa talks to the horses," Isla confided. "He thinks I don't know, but I do. He tells them all sorts of things." "That's enough, little chatterbox," Weston said, but there was affection in his voice. They rode in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Weston spoke again. "Your cabin's out past the mill, isn't it?" "Yes, Thomas bought it just before we married. It's small, but it's mine." She paused. "Well, for now, the bank has been making noises about the loan." He nodded, unsurprised. Banks had little patience for widows with no income. As they pulled up to her cabin, Hannah saw it through their eyes, the missing shingles on the roof, the sagging porch step, the wood pile that was far too small for the coming winter. Shame heated her cheeks. "Thank you for the ride," she said quickly, moving to climb down. "Wait!" Weston's voice stopped her. He seemed to be wrestling with something, his jaw tight, Finally, he said, "I need help." Hannah turned back, confused. "I'm sorry." "At the ranch? I need help." The words came out rushed, like he was afraid he'd change his mind. She needs a woman's influence, someone to teach her things I can't. And the house," he gestured vaguely. "I can keep a ranch running, but a house is different. Since Mary died, it's been—" "Papa burned the biscuits again yesterday," Isla supplied helpfully. "And last week, and the week before that. I can pay." Weston continued, ignoring his daughter's commentary. "Not much, but regular. Room and board included. Of course. You'd have your own space. Proper-like." Hannah stared at him, trying to understand. "You're offering me a position as what exactly?" "Housekeeper, cook, someone to—" He glanced at Isla. "Someone to help her grow up proper. She's getting to an age where she needs things I don't know how to give her." "But you don't know me," Hannah said. "You don't know anything about me except that I can't even walk into church without being laughed out. I know you loved your husband enough to wear your wedding dress to remember him, even knowing what folks would say." His gray eyes were steady on hers. "I know you stood up with dignity when lesser people would have run, and I know you were kind to my daughter just now, even with your own hurt fresh." "She really is pretty, Papa," Isla said earnestly. "Prettier than Mrs. Fletcher, and she's always saying she's the prettiest lady in Snowpine." "Isla, pretty isn't what matters," Weston said. "I know." The child sighed. "You always say that, but she's pretty and nice. That's even better." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. When was the last time anyone had called her Pretty Thomas? Of course. But he'd been her husband. He'd been obligated to find her attractive. "I don't—" she started, then stopped. What was there to consider? Really her cabin with its leaking roof and empty pantry, the whispers that followed her through town, the loneliness that pressed in on all sides like a living thing. "It's a fair ways out," Weston warned. "Hollow Ridge is nearly an hour from town in good weather. Gets cut off entirely sometimes in winter. And it's hard work. I won't pretend otherwise." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Hannah said softly. "Or of being cut off from town. To be honest, Mr. Dyer, that sounds more like a blessing than a hardship." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "When could you start?" The question hit her like cold water. He was serious. This wasn't charity or pity. He genuinely needed help and was offering her honest work. "I'd need a few days to settle things here," she said carefully. "Pack my belongings. Speak to the bank about the cabin." "Take the time you need. I'll come back with the wagon on Thursday, if that suits." "Papa, can I show her my room when she comes?" Isla asked excitedly. "And my dolly that Mama made, and the kittens in the barn." "If Mrs. Whitfield agrees to come, you can show her everything," Weston said. Hannah looked at the little girl's hopeful face, then at Weston's carefully neutral expression that didn't quite hide his own hope. "Thursday would be fine," she heard herself say. Isla clapped her hands. "Oh, good, I'll make sure Papa doesn't burn anything before you get there." "Well, I'll try. He's very good at burning things." "Thank you for that vote of confidence," Weston said dryly. He helped Hannah down from the wagon, then paused. "Are you sure about this? Mrs. Whitfield, I want you to be certain." Hannah looked back at her cold, empty cabin, then at the man and child waiting in the wagon. Isla had scooted closer to her father and was whispering something in his ear that made his stern face soften. "I'm certain," she said, and found that she meant it. "Thursday, then—" He touched his hat brim and clicked to the horses. "Goodbye, pretty lady," Isla called, waving enthusiastically. "I'll tell the kittens you're coming." Hannah stood at her gate, watching the wagon disappear down the rutted road. Pretty lady. Such simple words, said with such innocent conviction. She pressed her hand to her chest where something warm had taken root, something that felt dangerously like hope. Inside her cabin, she sat at her small table and made a list of what needed doing. There wasn't much to pack. Thomas hadn't left much behind, and she'd sold most of their nice things to pay for his burial. But what she had, she would bring his books. Certainly, the quilt her mother had made, the photograph of their wedding day, when she'd been slender and he'd been alive and the future had seemed so certain. She paused, looking at that photograph. The woman in it was pretty, she supposed, in the conventional way. Small-waisted, delicate-featured, the kind of woman who fit easily into church pews and society's expectations. That woman was gone now, buried under layers of grief and flesh. But today, a little girl had called her pretty, not out of duty or sympathy, but with the honest eyes of a child who saw what others missed. And a man had offered her not just work, but purpose, a place in a household that needed her. Hannah picked up Weston's handkerchief from where she'd laid it on the table. Tomorrow she would wash it, press it carefully, and return it on Thursday. It was a small thing, but it felt important to return it in better condition than she'd received it. That was what decent people did. They took care of what was entrusted to them. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and silent. By Thursday, the ground would be white. She would leave this cabin with its memories and ghosts, and start something new. The thought terrified her. It also, for the first time in 3 years, made her feel alive. In the distance, a wolf howled, lonely and wild. Hannah had always feared that sound, but tonight it seemed to speak of freedom rather than danger. Out there at Hollow Ridge, with its burned biscuits and motherless child and taciturn rancher, perhaps she could find a different kind of life, not the one she'd planned with Thomas, but something real and necessary nonetheless. She lit her lamp against the gathering dark and began to pack. Thursday arrived wrapped in frost and pale sunshine. Hannah stood on her porch with her 2 carpet bags and a small trunk, watching the road, true to his word. Weston appeared just after dawn, Isla bouncing beside him on the wagon seat. "Pretty lady," Isla called out before the wagon even stopped. "I told the kittens you were coming and they're very excited." Hannah smiled, the child's enthusiasm warming her more than her worn coat. "I'm excited to meet them too." Weston loaded her belongings with the same quiet efficiency she was beginning to recognize as his way. Few words, but careful hands that treated her meager possessions with respect. The ride to Hollow Ridge took them through countryside Hannah had never seen. The road wound between hills dotted with pine and cottonwood, past creeks running silver with snowmelt. Isla chattered like a magpie, pointing out landmarks, the rock that looked like a sleeping bear, the tree where eagles nested, the spot where she'd seen a fox family last spring. "That's our land starting here," Weston said eventually, gesturing to a wooden gate marked with a Hollow Ridge brand. 3,000 acres, give or take. Run about 200 head of cattle, plus the horses. The house, when it came into view, made Hannah's breath catch. It wasn't fancy. A solid 2-story log structure with a wide porch and stone chimney. But it had good bones, as Thomas would have said. Neglect showed in small ways, curtains hanging crooked in windows, weeds choking what had once been flower beds, a general air of masculine indifference to domestic details. "It needs work," Weston said, following her gaze. "Mary kept it different." "It's a good house," Hannah said firmly. "It just needs some attention." Inside was worse. Not dirty, exactly. Weston had clearly made efforts, but disorganized in the way of a man overwhelmed by tasks he didn't understand. Dishes were clean, but stacked haphazardly. Laundry was washed, but piled on chairs. Everything was functional, but nothing was homey. "Your room's upstairs," Weston said, carrying her trunk. "End of the hall. Isla's is next door, and mine's at the other end. There's a necessary house out back, but chamber pots for nighttime." The room was simple but larger than her entire cabin had been. a brass bed with a faded quilt, a washstand, a wardrobe, and a small desk by the window that looked out over the mountains. Someone, Isla, probably, had placed a jar of dried flowers on the desk. "I picked those," Isla confirmed, appearing in the doorway. "Papa said you liked flowers." "It's perfect," Hannah said, meaning it. The first days were disasters. Hannah hadn't cooked on a proper stove in months, having made do with a small brazier in her cabin. The massive iron range in Weston's kitchen defeated her completely. Her first batch of biscuits came out blackened on the bottom and raw in the middle. The beans she set to soak boiled over, flooding the stovetop. The coffee was so weak Weston politely poured it out and made a fresh pot himself. "I'm sorry," she said miserably after burning yet another meal. "I'm not usually this inept. It's just... everything's different here." "Takes time to learn a new stove," Weston said, scraping the charred remains of what should have been cornbread into the slop bucket for the pigs. Mary used to say this one had moods like a fractious mare. But knowing he was patient didn't ease Hannah's shame. She'd been hired to help. And instead, she was creating more work. At night, she lay in the comfortable bed and fought tears of frustration. What if she couldn't do this? What if she had to go back to town, to the whispers and the empty cabin and the hungry loneliness? The third morning, she came downstairs to find Weston had already made coffee and biscuits. "Thought I'd show you the stove's quirks," he said without meeting her eyes. "If you'd like." It was kindly done, this preservation of her dignity. He showed her how the dampers worked, how to gauge the heat, which burners ran hottest. His hands were sure and competent as he demonstrated, and Hannah found herself watching them instead of the stove brown from sun, nicked with small scars, gentle despite their strength. "Mary taught me," he said, catching her observation. "Said a man who couldn't feed himself was only half useful." That afternoon, while Weston was out with the cattle, Isla appeared in the kitchen dragging a wooden crate. "These were Mama's recipes," she announced, producing a worn journal. "Papa doesn't know I know where he keeps it, but I think Mama would want you to have it." Hannah opened the journal carefully. Mary Dyer's handwriting was clear and practical. Recipes interspersed with notes. Add extra milk on dry days. Weston likes his stew with less salt. Isla will eat anything if there's honey on it. "Your mama must have been a fine cook," Hannah said softly. "She was the best at everything," Isla said matter-of-factly. "Papa says I look like her, but I think he's just being nice. She was beautiful." Hannah studied the child dark curls escaping from braids, serious gray eyes, a stubborn chin. "I think you're beautiful too. And you know what? So did your mama. I'm certain." That evening, dinner was simple but successful beef stew using Mary's recipe, biscuits that were actually golden brown, dried apple pie for dessert. Weston's eyebrows rose at the first bite. "This is..." He paused, searching for words. "This is how Mary used to make it." Isla shared the recipe. Hannah admitted, "I hope that's all right." He looked at his daughter, who was trying to appear innocent while sneaking pieces of biscuit to the cat under the table. Mary would have liked that. She always said recipes were meant to be shared. As days turned to weeks, Hannah found her rhythm. Morning coffee before dawn, breakfast as the sun crept over the mountains. The endless cycle of cooking, cleaning, mending. But it wasn't drudgery. Isla was her constant shadow, chattering about school lessons, showing off her dolls, dragging Hannah to see new kittens or interesting beetles, or the first green shoots in the kitchen garden. And Weston was a puzzle. He spoke little, but Hannah learned to read his silences, the nod that meant approval, the almost smile when Isla made him laugh, the way he always removed his boots at the door without being asked, respecting the floors she'd scrubbed. One evening, she found him on the porch after supper, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. "I never thanked you properly," she said, joining him, "for this chance." "Nothing to thank me for. You're earning your keep twice over." He paused. Isla's happier than I've seen her since, well, in a long time. She misses her mother. Every day, but she's laughing again. Playing. Being a child instead of trying to take care of me. He glanced at her. That's your doing. Children are resilient. She just needed someone to notice she was still a child. And you, the question surprised her. Are you settling in all right? I know it's isolated out here. Hannah thought of her cabin in town, the whispers following her through streets, the loneliness that had pressed against her chest like a physical weight. I've never felt less isolated in my life. He nodded as if this made perfect sense. That night, she found a package outside her door. Inside was a new shawl, soft gray wool, well-made and warm. No note, but she recognized the careful wrapping, the same way Weston packaged supplies. Everything precise and thoughtful. She wore it the next morning and caught him looking at her across the breakfast table. Thank you, she said simply. Gets cold in that kitchen early mornings, he said, suddenly absorbed in his coffee. Can't have you catching sick. Isla looked between them with bright, knowing eyes. Pretty lady looks extra pretty in gray, doesn't she, Papa? Isla? Well, she does, even prettier than usual. Don't you think so? Weston's ears turned red. Eat your porridge. Hannah hid her smile in her own coffee cup. The child was incorrigible, but her innocent observations created moments like this. Moments where Weston's careful distance slipped, revealing glimpses of the man beneath. That afternoon, she found him working with a young horse in the corral. The animal was skittish, dancing away from his touch, but Weston's patience never wavered. He stood still, hand extended, voice low and steady, until the horse finally approached. You're good with them, Hannah observed from the fence rail. Horses are honest. They don't pretend or put on airs. Meet them where they are. Give them time to trust, and they'll give you everything. He stroked the animal's neck. People could learn from horses. Like you learned from me that I couldn't cook, she teased gently. A smile ghosted across his face. You cook fine now. Just needed time to trust the stove. Later, as she prepared supper, Hannah realized the tight knot of anxiety she'd carried for months had loosened. Her hands no longer shook. The crushing weight on her chest had lifted. She was useful here, needed. Not just for her work, but for her presence. For the way Isla lit up when she appeared. For the way the house felt warmer, more alive. She began to hum as she worked, an old hymn Thomas had loved. The sound surprised her. She hadn't hummed in so long. But here, in this kitchen with its temperamental stove and cat underfoot and child's drawings tacked to the walls, music seemed natural again. Through the window, she saw Weston heading in from the barn. He paused at the sound of her humming, his head tilted as if listening. Then he continued on, but she caught the small smile on his weathered face. That night, as she helped Isla with her letters, the child suddenly asked, Are you happy here? Hannah considered the question seriously. Yes, she said finally. I believe I am. Good. Isla bent back to her slate. Papa's happy too. He doesn't say so, but I can tell. He whistles sometimes now when he thinks no one's listening. Small things, Hannah thought. Small things that added up to something larger. A house becoming a home. A shattered woman finding her pieces. A silent man learning to smile. A motherless child blooming like the wildflowers she gathered. Outside, night settled over Hollow Ridge like a benediction, and for the first time in 3 years, Hannah felt she was exactly where she belonged. The spring thaw brought mud and new calves and a restlessness in the horses that kept Weston busy from dawn to dusk. Hannah had settled into the rhythm of ranch life, her days full of purpose and small satisfactions. She'd learned to coax the temperamental stove into cooperation, discovered which hens laid in hidden nests, and found joy in transforming the neglected house into a proper home. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. Hannah was in the kitchen garden with Isla, teaching her to distinguish between seedlings and weeds, when they heard the thunder of hooves, not the measured pace of Weston returning from the range, but wild, uncontrolled galloping. "Stay here," Hannah ordered Isla, but the child was already running toward the sound. A horse burst into the yard. One of the young mares Weston had been training, eyes rolling white with fear, riderless and trailing broken reins. Behind it came more horses, spooked into a stampede by something on the range. "The gate!" Hannah shouted, seeing it standing open where Weston had gone through that morning. If the horses got out onto the road... But Isla was already there, directly in their path, trying to grab the mare's trailing reins. Isla, no. Time slowed to heartbeats, the horses bearing down, the child so small in their path. Hannah's body moving before her mind caught up, launching herself across the yard. Her hands closed on Isla's dress, yanking her sideways as the first horse thundered past, so close Hannah felt the wind of its passage. They tumbled together into the mud as hooves churned the ground where Isla had stood. Hannah curled her body around the child, shielding her as more horses stampeded past, their fear infectious and terrible. Then Weston was there, appearing from nowhere, his voice cutting through the chaos with commands that made the horses veer away. Within moments that felt like hours. He had them turning, milling, finally calming. "Papa," Isla wriggled free from Hannah's protective embrace, muddy but unharmed. Weston dropped to his knees beside them, his face pale beneath its tan. His hands shook as he checked his daughter for injuries, then turned to Hannah. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," she gasped, though her heart still raced like the spooked horses. "Just muddy." "You saved her." His voice was rough, almost angry. "She could have been... You both could have been... But we weren't." Hannah pushed herself up, wincing at the bruises already forming. "We're all right." He helped her stand, his hands lingering on her arms as if assuring himself she was real and whole. This close. She could see the fear still stark in his eyes, the muscle jumping in his jaw. "Thank you," he said, so quietly Sean almost missed it. Then louder, firmer, "Thank you." That evening, after Isla had been bathed and fed and tucked into bed with extra hugs, Hannah found herself alone with Weston on the porch. Her body ached from the afternoon's violence, but she felt strangely peaceful. "I've been thinking," Weston said suddenly, "about what might have happened today if you hadn't been here. But I was here." "Yes." He turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You were here. You are here. Hannah, He stopped, frustrated with words that wouldn't come. In the kitchen. She'd learned to read his silences, but this one was different, charged with something that made her pulse quicken. "I should check on Isla," she said, suddenly nervous. "Wait." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. "I made this for you. Been carrying it around for days, trying to figure out how to... Well..." She unwrapped it carefully. Inside lay a wooden hair comb, carved with delicate flowers and leaves, polished until it gleamed in the lamplight. At its center, a small heart had been worked into the design, so subtle she might have missed it if she hadn't been looking. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "You lost yours. That first day at church. I saw it fall when you..." He cleared his throat. "Anyway, I thought you might like another." Hannah traced the carved heart with one finger, remembering her old comb shattering on the church floor as she fled the laughter. Such a small thing, but he'd noticed, he'd remembered. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything, just..." He gestured awkwardly. "Will you wear it?" She pulled the pins from her hair, letting the heavy mass fall around her shoulders. Her hands trembled as she gathered it back up, securing it with the comb. The wood was warm against her scalp, smooth as silk. "How does it look?" she asked, suddenly shy as a girl. Weston's eyes were dark in the lamplight. Right, he said simply. It looks right. Inside the house, a door creaked. Isla's voice called out, "Pretty lady Papa, I had a bad dream about the horses." The moment broke like a soap bubble. Hannah stood quickly. "I'll go to her." Hannah, her name on his lips, stopped her. "What I said earlier, about you being here, I meant it. This place, Isla, we need you. I need—" He stopped again, shaking his head. "Go on, see to her." She found Isla sitting up in bed, tears on her cheeks. "I dreamed the horses got you," the child whispered. "They were so big, and you were trying to save me, but they knocked you down and—" "Shh!" Hannah gathered her close. "I'm right here. See? Not even a scratch." "You were brave. Braver than Papa even. He said so at supper." "I wasn't brave. I was scared to death. But being scared doesn't mean you don't act. It just means you act despite the fear." Isla pulled back to study her face. "Is that why you came here even though you were scared?" "Out of the mouths of babes," Hannah thought. "Yes, I suppose it is." "I'm glad you were brave. I love you, pretty lady." The words came out muffled against Hannah's shoulder, but they rang clear as church bells in her heart. "I love you too, sweetheart." Later, after Isla had fallen back asleep, Hannah sat at her bedroom window, wearing her nightgown and wrapper. She'd taken the comb from her hair and held it now, studying the careful carving. How many evenings had Weston spent creating this? She pictured his hands, so gentle with horses and his daughter, working the wood with patience and skill. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Hannah, you still awake?" She opened the door to find Weston in the hallway, looking uncomfortable. "I wanted to make sure you were, that is, you took quite a fall today." "Some bruises, nothing serious." She hesitated, then stepped back. "Would you like to come in just for a moment?" He entered carefully, as if the threshold marked dangerous territory. His eyes went to the comb in her hands. "Thank you again," she said. "It's the finest gift I've ever received." "It's just wood and time." "No." She shook her head. "It's more than that. It's thoughtfulness. It's seeing me not as the town sees me, but as someone worth making beautiful things for." He moved closer, drawn by something in her voice. "Hannah, the town is blind. They see what they expect to see. But that day at church, when you stood up to all of them with your chin high and your flowers crushed in your hand, I saw strength, and since you've been here, I've seen kindness and patience and joy. You brought music back to this house. You gave Isla her smile back. You—" "What?" she whispered. "What did I give you?" His hand lifted as if to touch her face, then dropped. "Hope," he said roughly. "You gave me hope that life could be more than just surviving one day to the next." The air between them hummed with possibility. Hannah felt herself swaying toward him, drawn by the warmth in his eyes, the loneliness they both carried like a shared burden. "Weston," she breathed. But he stepped back, breaking the spell. "It's late. You should rest. Tomorrow's laundry day, and Lord knows that's work enough to fell a strong man." The mundane reminder of daily life steadied them both. Hannah managed a smile. "Good night, then." "Good night, and Hannah." He paused at the door. "What you did today, saving Isla, there aren't words enough. But I want you to know that you're important to us, to this place. Don't ever doubt that." After he left, Hannah sat on her bed, comb cradled in her lap. Important, such a simple word. But when had she last felt it? Not since Thomas died. Certainly, in town. She'd been an object of pity at best, ridicule at worst. But here, she was necessary, valued, maybe even loved. She thought of Isla's fierce hug, her declaration of love, of Weston's eyes when he'd given her the comb, dark with emotions he couldn't quite voice, of the way this house had begun to feel like home, not just a place of employment. Through her window, she could see the light still burning in Weston's room at the far end of the hall. Was he lying awake as she was, thinking of words almost spoken, of boundaries almost crossed? Or was he carving something else, his hands shaping wood as carefully as he was reshaping her understanding of what life could be? A coyote howled somewhere in the darkness, answered by another, not lonely sounds, but communication across the vast space of night. Perhaps that's what she and Weston were doing, calling to each other across their grief and fear, slowly closing the distance. She picked up the comb again, running her thumb over the hidden heart. Tomorrow would bring laundry and cooking and all the 1,000 tasks of ranch life. But tonight, she had this proof that someone saw her truly and found her worthy of beauty. It was enough. For now, it was more than enough. The trouble started with a trip to town for supplies. Hannah had been at Hollow Ridge for nearly 3 months, and Weston insisted she accompany him to help select fabric for new curtains and clothing for Isla. "I can give you a list," Hannah had protested, knowing what awaited her in Snow Pine. "Lists can't judge quality or color," Weston said firmly. "Besides, you can't hide out here forever." He was right, though Hannah wished he weren't. She dressed carefully in her best day dress, let out to accommodate her figure, but clean and neat, and fixed her hair with the wooden comb. If she must face the town's judgment, she'd do so with dignity. The ride-in was pleasant, Isla chattering between them on the wagon seat, pointing out wildflowers and cloud shapes. But as they reached the outskirts of Snow Pine, Hannah felt the familiar tightness in her chest. "You all right?" Weston asked quietly. "Fine," she lied, squaring her shoulders. Their first stop was Henderson's Dry Goods. Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened as Hannah entered, then narrowed with speculation. "Why, Hannah Whitfield? Haven't seen you in town for months." Her gaze flicked between Hannah and Weston. "Heard you were working out at Hollow Ridge." "Yes, ma'am. We need fabric for curtains, and some cotton for dresses." "Working." "Mrs." Henderson repeated, her tone making the words sound sordid. "Well, I suppose a woman must make her way somehow after losing her husband." Hannah's cheeks burned, but before she could respond, Weston stepped forward. "Mrs. Whitfield has been a godsend to my household. My daughter's never been happier or better cared for." His tone was perfectly civil, but there was steel underneath. "Mrs." Henderson subsided, showing them fabric with pinched lips. Hannah selected quickly, wanting only to leave. But Isla had other ideas. "This one," she exclaimed, pointing to a bolt of blue sprigged with tiny flowers. "It matches Pretty Lady's eyes." "Isla," Weston murmured, but Hannah was already smiling. "Then we must have it," she said, earning a delighted squeeze from the child. Their next stop was the bank, where Weston had business. Hannah waited outside with Isla, trying to ignore the stares and whispers of passers-by. She was studying the window of the milliner's shop when a familiar voice made her stomach drop. Well, Hannah Whitfield, or should I say the widow Whitfield. Samuel Price stood before her, the same man who'd courted her before Thomas, who'd spread ugly rumors when she'd chosen another. His smile was sharp as broken glass. "Mr. Price," she said coolly, drawing Isla closer. "Heard you were working for Dyer, cooking and cleaning. Is it—" His eyes traveled over her form insultingly. "Among other things, I'd wager—" "Mr. Price, there's a child present," Hannah said sharply. "Oh, I'm sure the child's seen plenty. Living in that house, a man alone with his housekeeper." He stepped closer, voice dropping. "You always did aim above yourself, Hannah. First Thomas, now Dyer. But men like him don't marry women like you. He's using you, and the whole town knows it." "That's enough." Weston's voice came from behind them, cold as winter wind. Hannah hadn't heard him approach, but there he stood, positioned between her and Samuel. "Dyer," Samuel said, his smile faltering. "Just having a friendly chat with Mrs. Whitfield." "Didn't sound friendly to me." Weston's hand rested casually on his hip, near his sidearm. Not a threat, exactly, but a reminder. Sounded like a man speaking disrespectfully to a lady in my employ. "Lady," Samuel scoffed. "That's rich." "Yes," Weston said evenly. "She is a lady, and you'll address her as such, or not at all." A crowd was gathering, drawn by the tension. Hannah saw Mrs. Henderson peering out her shop window, the minister's wife pausing with her market basket. "You defending her honor?" "Dyer." Samuel's voice rose, playing to the audience. "That's noble of you, but we all know what kind of woman takes up residence with a widower. She couldn't keep her own husband satisfied. Now she's—" The rest of his words were cut off as Weston's fist connected with his jaw. Samuel went down hard, landing in the muddy street with a splash. "Papa hit him," Isla announced unnecessarily, sounding more interested than alarmed. Weston flexed his hand, knuckles already reddening. "Any man who speaks that way about Mrs. Whitfield will answer to me," he said, loud enough for the gathered crowd to hear. "She's under my protection, and I won't tolerate disrespect toward her or any woman in my household." Samuel struggled to his feet, mud coating his fancy vest. "You'll regret this, Dyer." "No," Weston said calmly. "I don't believe I will." He turned to Hannah, offering his arm. "Ma'am, shall we finish our errands?" Hannah took his arm on shaking legs, aware of every eye upon them. As they walked away, she heard the whispers starting. But for once, they weren't all directed at her. "Did you see Samuel's face? About time someone knocked him down a peg. Dyer's sweet on her, mark my words. Can't say I blame him. She's good with that child." In the feed store, Mr. Jameson treated them with careful courtesy. At the blacksmith's, Big Pete actually smiled at Hannah and ruffled Isla's hair. The tide hadn't turned completely, but something had shifted. On the ride home, Isla dozed between them. Worn out from excitement, Hannah sat rigid, replaying the scene over and over. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "For what?" "For causing such a scene, for making you feel you had to defend me that way." Weston was quiet for a long moment. "Hannah, I need you to understand something. I didn't hit Sam Price because I felt I had to. I hit him because I wanted to. Because hearing him speak about you that way made me angry in a way I haven't felt since Mary died." "But your reputation—" "My reputation," he snorted. "I'm a rancher who keeps to himself and raises his daughter. That's all the reputation I need. But you deserve to walk through town without being subjected to that kind of talk. I'm used to it." "That doesn't make it right?" He glanced at her. "And you shouldn't have to be used to it." They rode in silence until the ranch came into view. As Weston lifted the sleeping Isla from the wagon, Hannah touched his arm. "Thank you, not just for today, but for seeing me as worth defending." He shifted Isla to one arm and caught Hannah's hand with his free one. "You're worth more than that. Hannah Whitfield. Someday I hope you'll believe it." That evening, after supper and chores, Hannah found a package on her bed. Inside was a length of the blue fabric Isla had admired, enough for a dress, and a note in Weston's careful hand. "For your eyes. W." She pressed the fabric to her cheek, remembering the solid warmth of his arm under her hand, the controlled violence of his defense, the way he'd said her name like it was something precious. Through her window, she could see him in the corral, working with the horses in the fading light. He moved with such patience, such gentle strength. The same hands that had bloodied Samuel Price's nose now soothed a skittish mare. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "It's me," Isla announced. "Can I come in?" "Of course, sweetheart." Isla climbed onto the bed beside her. Are you sad about what that mean man said? A little, Hannah admitted. Papa says mean people are just scared people acting tough. He says Mr. Price is probably scared because you chose Mr. Thomas instead of him. And now you're with us instead of alone like he wanted. Your papa is very wise. He likes you, Isla said matter-of-factly. Not just regular like, special like, the way he used to look at Mama sometimes. Hannah's heart squeezed. Isla, I'm not sad about it, the child continued. Mama wouldn't want Papa to be lonely forever, and she'd like you. You make good pie, and you're teaching me to sew, and you make Papa smile. She yawned hugely. Can I sleep in here tonight? If your papa says it's all right. He will. He can't say no when I ask nice. Within minutes, Isla was asleep, curled against Hannah's side like a trusting puppy. Hannah stroked the child's dark hair, thinking about love and protection and the courage it took to claim someone publicly as worth defending. Through the wall, she heard Weston's footsteps in the hall, pausing at her door. A soft knock. Come in, she called quietly. He opened the door, taking in the sight of his daughter sprawled across Hannah's bed. I should move her, he whispered. Let her stay, she's no trouble. He lingered in the doorway. About today. You have nothing to apologize for. I wasn't going to apologize. His eyes met hers in the lamplight. I was going to say that I'd do it again. We'll do it again, if anyone speaks to you that way. Weston, you're not alone anymore. Hannah, you have us now, and we have you. He cleared his throat. Good night. Good night, she whispered to the closing door. Later, lying in the dark with Isla warm against her side, Hannah thought about belonging, about a man's fist defending her honor and a child's casual declaration of love, about a house becoming home and a wooden comb and fabric the color of her eyes. She'd come to Hollow Ridge looking for work, for escape from the whispers and loneliness. What she'd found was so much more. A place where she was seen, valued, protected, where a taciturn rancher carved her beautiful things and a motherless child called her pretty lady and meant it. The moon rose over the mountains, painting the room in silver. Beside her, Isla mumbled in her sleep. Something about horses and pie. Hannah smiled in the darkness, her hand going to the wooden comb on the nightstand. Tomorrow there would be talk in town, but tonight she was safe in this house with these people who had become, without her quite noticing when it happened, her family. The autumn air was crisp with the promise of winter as Hannah pinned the last of the washing to the line. 6 months at Hollow Ridge had brought changes. The garden flourished under her care. The house gleamed with warmth. And Isla had grown 2 inches and lost her first tooth. It was while taking down the dried clothes that evening that Hannah heard it, Weston's voice carrying from the front porch where Reverend Morrison sat with a cup of coffee. She hadn't known the minister was visiting, had been out back all afternoon with the laundry. Need to think of appearances. Weston. The Reverend was saying, people are talking. Let them talk. Weston's voice was flat. It's not just idle gossip anymore. There are those saying it's improper. A young widow living here. For Isla's sake, if nothing else, you should consider making other arrangements. Hannah froze, the sheet in her hands forgotten. What arrangements would those be? Weston asked. Well, marriage, of course. Make it respectable. Or... The Reverend paused delicately. Send her back to town. I'm sure she could find work at the boarding house or... No. Weston, be reasonable. The woman is... The woman has a name? Mrs. Whitfield. And she's done more for this household in 6 months than anyone since Mary died. Isla adores her. And you, what do you feel for her? The silence stretched so long, Hannah thought they'd moved inside. Then Weston spoke, his voice carefully neutral. What I feel doesn't matter. I hired her to keep house and help with Isla. That's all. Is it because from where the town sits, it looks like more? Samuel Price is still spreading stories about that day you bloodied his nose. Sam Price can go to Weston. The Reverend's shock was audible. This is what I mean. She's affecting your judgment. A year ago, you'd never have brawled in the street like a common ruffian. A year ago, I had no reason to. Listen to yourself. You're protecting her like she's yours. But she's not, is she? You haven't offered marriage, haven't made any formal declaration. You're keeping her in limbo, and it's cruel to everyone involved. Hannah couldn't listen anymore. She dropped the sheet back in the basket and fled to the kitchen, her mind churning. The Reverend was right, wasn't he? She was in limbo, neither employee nor family, living in this strange space between what was and what might be. She was elbow deep in bread dough when Weston found her an hour later, after the Reverend had gone. You're making bread. We have plenty from yesterday. I needed to keep my hands busy. She didn't look at him, focusing on kneading with perhaps more force than necessary. Hannah. His voice was gentle. You heard. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was just. I know. He moved closer, leaning against the counter. Morrison means well, but he doesn't understand. What doesn't he understand? The words came out sharper than intended. That you're harboring a fallen woman, that the whole town thinks I'm warming your bed, that your reputation is suffering because of me. Stop. His hand covered hers on the dough, stilling her violent kneading. You're not fallen. You're not any of the things they say. Then what am I? She looked up at him finally, eyes burning with unshed tears. Your housekeeper, Isla's caretaker, you're what? Weston. He pulled back as if slapped. I don't know, he said honestly. I know what I hired you to be, but what you've become, I don't have words for it. The Reverend does. He thinks you should send me away, or marry me to make it respectable. She laughed bitterly. As if anyone would marry me for any reason other than respectability. Hannah, I should go. The words tumbled out in a rush. I've saved most of my wages. I could find rooms in town, maybe take in sewing. You could hire someone else, someone who wouldn't cause talk. No, his voice was firm. I won't send you away. But your reputation. Damn my reputation. The profanity shocked them both. Weston ran his hands through his hair in frustration. I don't care what the town thinks, but I care that you're unhappy. That you're standing in my kitchen talking about leaving like it would be easy. Like it wouldn't tear Isla apart. Like it wouldn't. He stopped abruptly. Wouldn't what? She whispered. He turned away. I need to check the horses. He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone with her bread dough and her breaking heart. She shaped the loaves mechanically, her mind elsewhere. The Reverend was right about one thing. This couldn't continue as it was. Something had to change. She was setting the bread to rise when Isla burst in, tears streaming down her face. Pretty lady, Papa says you might go away. Tell him you won't tell him. Hannah knelt, gathering the sobbing child close. Oh, sweetheart, where did you hear that? I was in the barn. I heard Papa talking to Jupiter, and he said maybe it would be better if you went back to town. And I ran here fast as I could. Isla pulled back, her small face fierce. You can't go. You're ours now. Isla. No, when Mama went to heaven. She didn't want to, but she had to. But you don't have to go to heaven yet. And town isn't that far, but it might as well be heaven because you won't be here for breakfast, or to braid my hair, or teach me letters, or make Papa smile when he thinks nobody's looking. Hannah's heart shattered at the child's desperate logic. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices. Then make the choice to stay, please. Isla's arms tightened around her neck. I'll be extra good. I won't track mud in the house or complain about arithmetic or hide vegetables under my plate. Just please don't go. Oh, my darling girl. Hannah rocked her gently. This isn't about you being good or bad. You're perfect just as you are. Then, why is it because of what mean people say? Because I don't care what they say. Neither does Papa. Not really. He just gets that worried look like when the bills come due. Footsteps on the porch announced Weston's return. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene, his daughter clinging to Hannah like a lifeline, both of them tear-stained. "Isla," he began. "Tell her." "Papa," Isla demanded. "Tell her she can't go." "I can't tell her that," he said quietly. "Mrs. Whitfield is a free woman. She can go where she pleases." "But she pleases to be here, don't you, pretty lady?" Hannah looked over Isla's head at Weston. He stood framed in the doorway, backlit by the setting sun, and the expression on his face stopped her breath. Such longing there, such carefully contained hope. "Yes," she whispered. "I please to be here." "Then it's settled." Isla pulled back, satisfied. "Now, can we have supper? All this crying made me hungry." Despite everything, Hannah laughed. "Wash your hands first." As Isla scampered off, Hannah rose to face Weston. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "I need to say something," he interrupted. "And I need you to let me finish." He took a breath. "When Mary died, I thought that was the end of softness in my life. I figured Isla and I would manage. But there'd be no more laughter in this house, no more music, no more light. Then you came. Weston." "Let me finish. Please." He stepped closer. "You think the town's gossip bothers me, but it doesn't. What bothers me is that they might be hurting you. What bothers me is that I want to offer you more than a job, but I'm terrified you'll say no. What bothers me is that every night I lie awake thinking about you at the other end of the hall and wondering what right I have to want you there." Hannah's hands flew to her mouth. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Reverend Morrison was half right. This arrangement can't continue as it is, but not because of propriety or gossip." He moved closer still, until she could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes. "It needs to change, because I can't keep pretending you're just my housekeeper. Because Isla already thinks of you as her mother. Because Papa, pretty lady, I washed my hands with soap and everything." Isla's voice shattered the moment. Weston stepped back, frustration and amusement warring on his face. "We'll continue this later," he said quietly. "But Hannah, don't pack, please." Through supper, Hannah felt as if she were floating. Isla chattered about school and kittens, blissfully unaware of the charged looks passing between the adults. Each time Hannah's eyes met Weston's, her pulse jumped. After dishes were done and Isla was in bed, Hannah found herself back on the porch, wrapped in her shawl against the cool night. She wasn't surprised when Weston joined her. "I handled that badly earlier," he said without preamble. "Morrison rattled me. And then, hearing you talk about leaving, I'm not good with words, Hannah. Never have been." "You did all right earlier," she said softly, before Isla interrupted. He huffed a laugh. "That child has terrible timing," he sobered. "I meant what I said, every word." "I know." She turned to face him. "But Weston, what are you offering I need to understand?" He was quiet for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. "I'm offering you a choice. Stay as you are, and I'll defend your presence here until my dying day. Or," he paused, seeming to steel himself, "or stay as my wife." The words hung between them like stars in the clear night sky. Hannah couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "I know I'm not much of a catch," he continued, rushing now. "A widower with a child. A ranch that barely breaks even. Hands that know more about horses than courting. And you deserve better than a man who can't even propose properly. But I can offer you a home that's truly yours. A daughter who adores you. And a husband who would spend every day trying to make you happy." "Weston," she breathed, but he wasn't finished. "I don't expect an answer tonight, or even soon. Just think about it, and know that whatever you decide, you have a place here as long as you want it." He stood abruptly. I should go. Early morning tomorrow. He was at the door when she found her voice. Thomas used to say I made the best cornbread in the territory. He turned, confused by the apparent non sequitur. But you know what? She continued, standing to face him. He never carved me a comb. He never defended my honor with his fists. He never looked at me the way you do when you think I'm not watching. She moved closer, her heart hammering. I loved my husband, Weston, but what I feel for you, it's different, deeper, like the difference between a stream and a river. Hannah, her name was a prayer on his lips. Ask me again, she whispered. Not as a choice or an arrangement. Ask me real. He crossed the porch in 2 strides, taking her hands in his. Hannah Whitfield, will you marry me not for propriety or gossip, or even for Isla, though Lord knows she'd never forgive me if I let you go? Marry me because I love you, because this house is empty without you, because you've made me remember what it feels like to hope for tomorrow. Yes, she said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, yes, yes. He kissed her then, there on the porch with the moon rising and the night birds calling. It was a kiss of promise and passion, of loneliness ending and love beginning. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. We should tell Isla in the morning, Hannah said, practical even through her joy. She'll be impossible if we wake her now. She'll be impossible anyway, Weston said, but he was smiling. My daughter, our daughter, our daughter. The words sent warmth flooding through Hannah's chest. Tomorrow there would be plans to make, a wedding to arrange, a town to face down. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of a man who saw her truly and loved her anyway. At a ranch that had become home, with a family that had claimed her heart. No more talk of leaving. Weston murmured against her hair. You're ours now, Hannah Whitfield, and we're yours. Forever, she agreed, and sealed it with another kiss under the vast Montana sky. The first winter storm arrived 3 days after Weston's proposal, as if nature itself conspired to test their newfound happiness. Snow fell in thick curtains, obscuring the mountains and turning the ranch into an island of white. Hannah woke to Isla's excited shouts about the snow, but something felt wrong. The child's door stood open, her bed empty, and a cold draft swept through the hall from the front door hanging ajar. Isla, Hannah called, pulling on her wrapper. Sweetheart, where are you? Weston emerged from his room, already dressed. What's wrong? Isla's not in her bed, and the front door. They both saw it at the same time through the window, small footprints leading away from the house into the swirling white. Isla's red cloak was missing from its hook. She must have gone to check on the kittens, Weston said, but worry edged his voice. The barn wasn't far, but in this storm, even a short distance could become deadly. They dressed quickly, Hannah's fingers fumbling with buttons. Outside, the wind hit like a physical blow, driving snow into their faces. The footprints were already filling, becoming harder to follow. Isla, Weston shouted, his voice swallowed by the storm. Isla, answer me! They followed the fading trail past the barn, empty of little girls, though the kittens mewed in their hay nest, and toward the creek. Hannah's heart climbed into her throat. The creek would be frozen. But if Isla had tried to cross... There! Weston pointed to a flash of red near a stand of cottonwoods. They ran, stumbling through drifts, calling her name. They found her huddled beneath a tree, her small body curled into a ball, the red cloak her only protection against the cold. She was conscious, but barely, her lips blue, her words slurred. Pretty lady, I was looking for Mama's angel. Shh, baby, don't talk. Hannah stripped off her own coat, wrapping it around the child while Weston lifted her. We need to get her warm, he said tersely, already moving toward the house. The journey back seemed endless, Hannah breaking trail while Weston carried his daughter. By the time they reached the house, Isla had stopped shivering, a bad sign. Hannah knew. "Get the tub," Weston ordered. "Warm water, not hot." They worked in desperate tandem, filling the tub, stripping Isla's frozen clothes. The child whimpered as they lowered her into the water, a good sign despite the pitiful sound. "It hurts," Isla whispered. "I know, sweetheart." Hannah knelt beside the tub, holding the girl's hand while Weston added more warm water gradually. "But you're safe now. We've got you." "I saw Mama," Isla said dreamily. "In the snow. She was wearing her angel dress, and she said to go back, said Pretty Lady would worry." Hannah met Weston's eyes over the child's head, seeing her own fear reflected there. How close had they come to losing her? As color slowly returned to Isla's skin, she became more lucid, though exhausted. They dried her gently, dressed her in warm flannel, and Weston carried her to the kitchen where Hannah had stoked the stove to blazing. "I'm sorry, Papa," Isla mumbled against his shoulder. "I just wanted to find Mama's snow angel place. She used to make them with me there. Remember?" "I remember." Weston's voice was rough. "But Isla, you can't go out alone in storms. You could have—" He couldn't finish. "I could have gone to heaven like Mama." Isla's matter-of-fact tone made Hannah's eyes burn. "But I'm not ready yet. I want to see you and Pretty Lady get married first." "Then you need to be more careful," Hannah said firmly, tucking blankets around the child. "Because we need you at that wedding." Isla managed a small smile. "Will I get to wear my Sunday dress?" "Any dress you want," Weston promised. "Just no more adventures in blizzards." "Agreed." "Agreed." They sat vigil as Isla dozed, her breathing gradually deepening into true sleep. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside, the kitchen was warm and safe. Hannah made coffee with shaking hands, the magnitude of what almost happened hitting her fully. "I can't lose her," Weston said suddenly, his eyes never leaving his daughter. "She's all I have left of Mary, and if something happened—" "Nothing happened," Hannah said firmly, though her own heart still raced. "She's safe." "Because you heard her leave, because we found her in time. But what if—" "No." Hannah moved to stand beside his chair, her hand on his shoulder. "No what ifs. She's here, she's warm, she's breathing. That's what matters." He covered her hand with his. "You're right. When I saw her in the snow like that, so small and still, I thought—" "I know. I thought it too." They stood together, drawing comfort from shared fear and shared relief. After a while, Weston spoke again. "She went looking for Mary. Even now, after all this time, she still searches for her mother." Hannah's throat tightened. "She always will, in some way. That's how love works. It doesn't end just because someone's gone." "Do you still look for Thomas?" The question surprised her with its directness. "Sometimes, in small moments, when I see his favorite color or hear a song he liked, but—" She paused, choosing her words. "But I've learned there's room in a heart for more than one love. Thomas taught me how to love. What I feel for you and Isla, it doesn't diminish what I had with him. It's something new, built on the foundation of who I became because of him." "Mary would have liked you," Weston said softly. "She always said I needed someone to challenge me, make me use more than 3 words at a time." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "She'd have loved seeing Isla call you Pretty Lady. Mary was big on seeing beauty where others missed it." "She sounds wonderful. She was different from you, quieter, maybe gentler, but strong in her own way." He looked up at Hannah. "I'm not comparing, just—" "I understand. They're part of us, Thomas and Mary. We wouldn't be who we are without them." She squeezed his shoulder. "And maybe that's why we found each other. 2 people who understand that love doesn't have to be singular to be true." Isla stirred, mumbling something about angels and kittens. Weston reached out to smooth her hair, the gesture infinitely tender. "I want to move the wedding up," he said suddenly. "I don't want to wait for spring. Life's too uncertain, too fragile. I want you to be truly ours, legally and in the eyes of God, as soon as possible." "Weston, please." He turned to look at her fully. "Today proved how quickly things can change. I don't want to waste another day wondering if you'll stay. I want to know you're my wife, that Isla can call you Mama if she wants, that this is your home in every way that matters." Hannah thought of the terror of those footprints disappearing into snow, of Isla's blue lips and still form. "Yes," she said, "as soon as you like. Tomorrow, if the minister could manage it." She laughed, despite everything. "Perhaps give me a week to make a dress, and Isla needs to recover fully. But soon, yes, very soon." "A week, then." He stood, lifting Isla carefully. "Let's get her to bed. You'll stay with her tonight." "Of course." They settled Isla in her bed, piling on quilts until only her face showed. Hannah pulled the chair close while Weston added wood to the small stove that heated the upstairs. "I'll spell you in a few hours," he said. "No need. I won't sleep anyway." She touched Isla's forehead, still cool, but naturally so. "I need to watch her breathe for a while." He understood. At the door, he paused. "Hannah, what you said about room in a heart for more than one love, thank you. I've felt guilty sometimes, for wanting to be happy again, like it betrayed Mary somehow." "The only betrayal would be wasting the life you have left," Hannah said gently. "Mary loved you. She'd want you happy, just like Thomas would want that for me." He nodded, throat working. "A week, then next Sunday, if the storm breaks." "Next Sunday," she agreed. After he left, Hannah sat in the dim light, watching Isla sleep. The child's color was good now, her breathing easy. Outside, the wind howled, but it no longer sounded threatening. It was just weather, just winter doing what winter did. "You scared us, little one," she whispered. "But you came back. Your mama sent you back to us." Isla's eyes fluttered open briefly. "Pretty lady, are you going to be my mama now? Would you like that?" "Yes, please." The child's hand found hers. "Papa needs you, and I need you. And you need us too, don't you?" "More than you know," Hannah admitted. "Good. Then everybody gets what they need. That's what Mama always said was best, when everybody gets what they need." Her eyes closed again. "Love you, pretty lady." "I love you too, sweetheart. Now sleep. I'll be right here." She kept her promise, sitting guard through the long night as snow piled against the windows and wind rattled the shutters. When dawn finally broke, pale and clear, the storm had passed. Isla woke hungry and chattering, no worse for her adventure except for a spectacular cold. "Can we make snow angels today?" she asked over breakfast, then caught the adults' expressions. "When I'm all better, and with you both there, Mama's angel place is pretty, but it's better with family." "Yes," Weston said firmly. "With family. Always with family from now on." "A week," Hannah thought, catching his eye over Isla's head. In a week, they'd be that family in truth, bound by law and blessed by God. But sitting here in the warm kitchen, with the disaster averted and love acknowledged, they already were. The wedding couldn't come soon enough. Sunday dawned clear and bright, the snow sparkling like scattered diamonds across Hollow Ridge. Hannah stood before the mirror in her room, wearing the blue dress she'd sewn from the fabric Weston had given her. Her hands trembled as she fixed her hair with a wooden comb. "Pretty lady, you look like a princess," Isla burst in. Resplendent in her Sunday best with new ribbons, Hannah had added. "Papa's wearing his good suit, and he shaved twice, and he keeps checking his pocket watch even though we're not late." "Is he nervous?" Hannah asked, amused despite her own butterflies. He says he's not, but he spilled coffee on his first shirt. Isla giggled. Come see. They found Weston in the kitchen, indeed wearing a fresh white shirt with his good black suit. He turned at their entrance, and the look on his face made Hannah's breath catch. You're beautiful, he said simply. Papa, you're supposed to save that for the ceremony. Isla informed him, I'll say it then too. His eyes never left Hannah. Ready. As I'll ever be. The ride to town passed in a blur. Hannah had worried about facing the townspeople, but Weston had been firm. They would marry in the church, in front of God and everyone, with nothing to hide or be ashamed of. Besides, Isla had insisted on a real wedding with flowers and everything. To Hannah's surprise, the church was fuller than expected. Not packed, but respectable. Mrs. Henderson sat in her usual pew, lips pursed but present. Big Pete from the blacksmith shop had cleaned up and brought his whole family. Several ranch families from the valley had come, people who knew Weston's worth beyond town gossip. But it was the figure in the back who made Hannah's eyes fill. Reverend Morrison, who had counseled Weston to send her away, stood ready to perform the ceremony. Everyone deserves happiness, he said quietly when they reached him. I was wrong to suggest otherwise. May God bless this union. The ceremony was simple. Weston's hands were steady as he held hers, his voice clear as he spoke his vows, when he promised to love, honor, and cherish her. Hannah heard the weight of truth in every word. Hannah, take thee, Weston. Her voice caught, overwhelmed by the moment. Here, where she'd been mocked for wearing her first wedding dress. She stood in a new dress, entering a new life. To have and to hold from this day forward. Can I hold the rings? Isla piped up, earning gentle laughter from the congregation. When Reverend Morrison pronounced them man and wife, Weston's kiss was tender but brief, mindful of their audience. But his hand holding hers was warm and sure as they turned to face the town as Mr. and Mrs. Dyer. The reception was held at the ranch. Hannah had insisted, wanting their first gathering as a married couple to be at home. Several families made the journey, bringing food and good wishes. Even Mrs. Henderson came, stiffly offering a jar of her prize-winning preserves. I misjudged you, she said quietly to Hannah. That child is blooming under your care. And Weston, well, I haven't seen him this content since Mary passed. It was as close to an apology as Hannah would get, and she accepted it graciously. As the sun set, the guests departed, leaving the new family alone. Isla, exhausted from excitement, fell asleep on the sofa mid-sentence, clutching a piece of wedding cake. I'll carry her up, Weston said, but Hannah stopped him. Together. They carried Isla to bed together, tucking her in with whispered good nights. In the hallway afterward, Weston caught Hannah's hand. No more separate ends of the hall, he said softly. You're my wife now. And glad of it, she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. Their wedding night was tender and sacred, two wounded hearts finding healing in each other's arms. Later, as moonlight painted the room silver, they talked in whispers. I have something for you, Weston said, reaching for something beside the bed. A wedding gift. It was a small wooden box, beautifully carved with wildflowers. Inside lay a key. What's this to? Your room. Well, what was your room? I thought maybe you'd want a space that's just yours, for sewing or reading or just being alone sometimes. I know this house is full of Mary's memory, and I want you to have something that's only yours. Hannah's eyes filled. Oh, Weston. Is it? Do you like it? It's perfect. You're perfect. She kissed him soundly. But you know what I really want? What? To plant a garden come spring, a big one, with vegetables and flowers all mixed together. And maybe to teach some of the valley children their letters. Isla can't be the only one needing education out here. A school here. Just informal, maybe once a week to start. Would you mind? Mind? He pulled her closer. Hannah, you could turn this place into a circus if it made you happy, though I draw the line at elephants. She laughed, the sound bright in the darkness. No elephants, just children and gardens and maybe some more of those kittens Isla keeps finding. Sounds like a good life. The best life. She agreed. In the morning, Hannah woke to find Isla had crept in at dawn, curled between them like a puppy. Weston's arms stretched across both of them, protective even in sleep. Mama, Isla whispered, seeing Hannah's eyes open. The word hit Hannah like a lightning bolt. What did you say? Is it okay to call you Mama? Papa said I should ask first, but it just came out. Oh, sweetheart, yes, it's okay. It's more than okay. Good, because I already told the kittens that's what I was going to call you. She snuggled closer. Mama Hannah, it sounds right, doesn't it? It sounds perfect. Weston's eyes opened, taking in his daughter and wife with sleepy contentment. Morning, family. Morning, Papa, morning, Mama. Can we have pancakes? Of course, Hannah said, marveling at how natural it felt. With berry syrup. Yes, please. As they rose to start their first full day as a proper family, Hannah caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the broken widow who'd stood in a too-tight wedding dress facing mockery. This woman was rounder, yes, but also stronger. Her eyes held warmth instead of sorrow, hope instead of resignation. You're doing it again, Weston said, coming up behind her. What? Looking at yourself like you're surprised by what you see. I am surprised. This isn't the life I planned. No. He wrapped his arms around her waist, meeting her eyes in the mirror. It's better. She leaned back against him, feeling the solid truth of his presence. Yes, it is. From downstairs, Isla's voice called. Are you coming? The kittens are hungry and so am I. We're coming, Hannah called back, then quieter to Weston. We're home. Yes, he agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. We're home. They went downstairs together to start their life. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real in theirs and filled with more love than any of them had dared hope for. The house that had been silent now rang with laughter. The man who spoke in monosyllables now whispered endearments. The child who'd lost her mother had found another. And the woman who'd been mocked for her size and circumstances had discovered that sometimes the best things come wrapped in unexpected packages. Through the kitchen window, the mountains stood eternal, witness to all the small human dramas playing out in their shadow. At Hollow Ridge Ranch, a new family was writing their story, one day at a time, one meal at a time, one I love you at a time. It was, as Isla had said, exactly what everybody needed. Thank you, dear listeners, for joining me on this journey through the Wild West and matters of the heart. I hope Hannah and Weston's story touched you as much as it touched me. Where are you listening to this tale, whether you're driving through the countryside, cozied up at home, or taking a break at work? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Please subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts. Did you cry when Isla called Hannah Mama? Did your heart race during the stampede? Let's share these emotions together. Partners, until next time, keep your hearts open and your spirits wild.